Right, that's an overview of the progression in multiplication. Mrs. Fletcher-Cunn's not going to speak over the initial processes of multiplication, because as she says, multiplication in early years, foundation stages, taught through a very informal, practical method. More formal methods of recording would begin in Key Stage 1, and that's the snapshot overview that shows the progression that ends up in the more compact method that we might recognise from our own school days. Again, the whole concept is based on their awareness and understanding of the place value of numbers and what each digit is representing. At this point, I think it's probably worthwhile mentioning tables, because obviously by the time children get into year 5, year 6, they might be working with multiplying hundreds, tens and units by 2.4 and be expected to sort of record that on paper, and obviously they're not going to be able to undertake that operation if they don't have an understanding of their tables, facts, which do begin in Key Stage 1, but obviously by the time they're in year 5, they're meant to know all their timetables, inside out, back to front, upside down, off by heart. And I do find in year 6 that a lot of the children have quite secure knowledge of the operations that I'm teaching, but with some children it's still their lack of knowledge of their tables facts that is the barrier to their being successful. So learning tables again is something that's really important, and by the time a child's in year 5, we would expect them. We would like them to know all of their tables, but obviously not all in one go. And your child's class teacher would be helping your child secure their multiplication facts throughout later Key Stage 1 and certainly into Key Stage 2. So that's the overview for multiplication. Okay,
so we would start off looking at multiplication very, very simply as repeated addition at the beginning within year 2. So looking at not just simple 2 times table, adding 2 4 times, we would look at a lot of other numbers. We would look at it overall so that they were aware that the multiplication is the same as repeated addition. And because they know their number facts, they can double numbers, they can then quadruple the numbers, and they should be able to know those quite securely. So from repeated addition, we then move on to the arrays, and linking it very, very similarly to the addition, so that we know that we can add the numbers in any order, and in the same way we can multiply them in any order and we'll still get the same answer. And it would literally be very, very pictorial. There would be the arrays, so 2 rows of 4 or 4 rows of 2, and that's very much the way that we teach it within year 2, is looking at the groups of the rows of how many, so it's 2 times 4 would be the same as 2 groups of 4, and keeping it very, very practical in that way. The children are very, very keen to want to learn their times tables, and all I would say initially within year 2, rather than encouraging them to know their times tables off by heart, so 2, 3, 4, 5, whichever ones it may be, looking at it this way so they actually understand what they're doing and what the multiplication number sentence actually means. There are children that can reel off 6 times 2 is 12 and not actually understand what they've done or what it actually means. They can give you the fact, but it's about understanding it and breaking it back down again so they know it's either repeated addition, 6 groups of 2, or 2 add 2 add 2 add 2 and so on to give you that number fact. And this is very much where we would be within year 2, not just looking at the smaller numbers but looking at bigger numbers as well, so they're really understanding and got a good grasp of what multiplication involves. And again, it wouldn't be written in very, very formal methods. They may write the number sentences, for example, as you can see on the bottom here, but that would be as far as we would more than likely go within year 2.
Okay. The interim method, the less recognisable formal method of recording, is called the grid method, and it's an extension of the pictorial representation that Sarita was talking about. And again, it's based on that fundamental understanding of the understanding of place value and what each digit is actually standing for. For example, 4 multiplied by 13 is actually 4 multiplied by a 10 multiplied by 3, and again, the numbers are broken up into their tens and their units, and the children are taught the concept in that way. And the visual representation does actually help them understand what they're actually doing as well. They might sort of use practical equipment to start with to help them, so that they're understanding that it's 4 lots of 10 and 4 lots of 3. You can see that progression there onto that method there, which, if you took away the pictorial representation, shows that the numbers are partitioned into tens and units. The children would be encouraged to draw a grid. When I taught Year 5, I found that this method was the method that caused possibly the most confusion with parents, because it was a method that they hadn't witnessed before when they were at school. And I used to get lots of mums and dads sort of saying, "Oh, you know, can you explain that method to me that you've taught my child?" And often when they have been shown what it's representing, they do finally agree that it is quite a good way of securing their understanding of what they are actually doing. So they partition the numbers, they're encouraged to draw the grid, place the partition numbers down the side, and then they multiply each numbers that correspond to the right and to the top, and the answers go into the different sections of the grid, and then they're encouraged to add up those answers to find the final total. This method, I do have to say, although we do cover the more standard compact methods, which I'll show you in a minute, this does remain a favourite method with children right through into Year 6, and my class will be doing the SATs next week, and I think most, even the more able mathematicians, choose to use that method because they make less mistakes and they understand what they're doing, and they multiply them out, and they feel more confident and secure with that method. Some children might not move on to the next stage, which I'll show you in a minute. They might stick and leave primary school, and that will be the method that they will use to multiply numbers. But my class do Year 6s and Year 5s. I don't know if you find, Jane, they do like that. They do like that method because they can see what they're actually doing and break the numbers up. I do find that your less able children as well can be successful in multiplying, hundreds, tens and units by tens and units using that method. But if you move on to the next method, which is maybe the method that you remember from school, can we go back to that other slide? Can you see how the children do prefer that method? Because there's a big change going from that, where you've got your 10 and your 3 and your 10 and your 2, and they can methodically multiply out the numbers. There's really it's really quite, the children find that much more logical and confident in doing that rather than this method. Because obviously the children have to multiply, first of all, multiply the units 7 by 6, and then the units by the tens, then multiply the 2 tens by the units, and then the tens. And remember that because the second multiplication that they're doing is they're working with tens, they need to remember that a 0 then needs to go in that units box because we're working with tens. So although that method is covered in school, you can see why most of my class, in fact I think nearly all my class this year, choose to use the grid method for multiplying. Obviously, that's the teaching maths is continued as they move into Key Stage 3 and at high school, and this method would be worked on even further. And their understanding of place value and the concept of multiplying the more standard way in the more traditional format. So that's multiplication, a snapshot of it.